Thank you so much for joining, everyone. We're currently with 90 people here, and we of course have some wonderful panelists joining us as well. This is our third Operations Hub show and tell. The last one we did was back in December, and it was a huge success. So we're continuing on this train. If you want to rewatch any of like the previous show and tells, you can of course do so. I'll try and put like the link to our YouTube channel in the chat. The previous ones I've uploaded in the past week. So if you want to rewatch some other features and stuff that we showcased on Operations Hub, you can watch it there. And before I continue, I'd love to do like a shameless plug for another event that we're holding on March 3rd. It's in collaboration with Rev Partners, and it's called Becoming a HubSpot Admin. A lot of you are in the field of operations, which makes you kind of an admin by proxy. And with the Operations Hub launch, more and more companies are choosing HubSpot as their platform for growth. And so the need for admin rises too. So if you want to learn what it means to become an admin, be sure to sign up for this event. I'll paste the link as well in the chat. All right, there we go. With that said, let's focus on what we have in front of us. It's an Operations Hub show and tell. And for those who don't know me, I am Jan. I'm your host for today, and I'm the head of the HubSpot RevOps and Operations community. It's where we try to create a space for all kinds of operations folks and professionals to connect and learn with one another. That's why we're bringing you also this show and tell here, to bring you up to speed on everything that HubSpot and Operations Hub has in store for you, either that we just released or that's coming up in the future. Now, in order for all of us to get to know each other a little bit better, I will be sharing another poll here in the chat. And just kind of to ask like what kind of Operations Hub feature you're currently using. There are 4 options. Are you using DataSync by HubSpot? Are you using like any of the format data, the automation features, or are you using Datasets? And feel free to fill in that poll. This is also just to give our panelists a bit of an idea of, who we have in front of us and who we should tailor this event to. Okay, and it seems like we have lots of people here actually using DataSync or like one of the automation features or Datasets. And votes are still trickling in, but they're pretty even. Only 35% of you seems to are completely new to this, but that's totally fine. I'll share the results again with everyone here. Really interesting, really interesting. All right, so that was that poll. So this is our agenda for today. First, we'll talk a bit about Product Sync, one of the new DataSync by HubSpot features. And we have Frans Leys of the DataSync team here who will talk a little bit more about all of that. Then we have, of course, we'll talk a little bit more about schedule triggers, one of the new features added to Operations Hub Professional. And we have Megan and Zach here to give you like a deep dive in all of that. And lastly, we'll talk about Datasets, and we have Stephen here as well to give you like a rundown there. Cool. So what is Operations Hub? We saw around 35% of you aren't using Operations Hub at the moment. So I'm assuming most of you, not every one of you, will be as familiar with Operations Hub yet. Why did HubSpot launch a product called Operations Hub? Well, it's because in our research, we found that a lot of operations teams at companies are pretty underserved. They're not set up for success, and they are pretty overwhelmed with their work. And that's it's a pretty significant issue, because as your company starts to grow, an overwhelmed ops team will quickly turn into a bottleneck. You need a more proactive operations team instead of a reactive one, so they can keep that machine oiled and fueled instead of constantly rushing left to right, stitching up and fixing everything together. So when we investigated why a lot of ops teams were overwhelmed, we kind of identified 3 core areas, and we love alliterations here at HubSpot, so we dubbed them the 3 Ps. The first stands for platform, that process, then perspective. Ops teams need a platform on which they can build, a platform built for scale on which they can connect all kinds of apps to and easily manage all of those integrations. And that's why we built Datasync by HubSpot. The next second P is process. As you know, repetitive patterns should be automated so your teams can, so your go-to-market teams can focus on what actually matters. That's why we added custom code actions, data format actions, and scheduled triggers to expand the functionality of our core workflows tool to enable you to virtually do anything with workflows. And also like removing the need for manual data cleanup. And the third P is perspective. We added those two features only a couple months ago. Ops folks are responsible for, keeping the data that leaders rely on to make their strategic decisions clean and organized. So we created Datasets, a tool to curate all of your company's data within HubSpot. And then we also launched Data Share, Snowflake Data Share, so you can send all your data easily to Snowflake and have all of that data there visualized by any business intelligence tool that you run on top of that. So that's basically Operations Hub in a nutshell. Quick reminder before we get actually into this, because I feel like I've been talking for ages again. Quick reminder, if you have any questions for us, please put them in the Q&A and not in the chat. I can't really monitor the chat all that well, and the Q&A is very, very well organized. So if you have any questions during any part of this presentation, just put them there and we'll be able to answer them. All right, so I think we're ready to go. Frans, well, before I get you, I forgot we had one slide again. After the discussion here, feel free to join the community where there's a discussion thread. I'll quickly link that as well, so you can find it afterward. And the recording will be sent to all of you tomorrow. Okay, so now we can actually get started. Frans, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to be showing and telling some new features to Datasync.
Yeah, me too. So you are the product manager of Datasync apps. So I guess we'll start at the beginning. Like for any folks who are kind of familiar with Datasync, can you please kind of explain what it is, where to find it, and maybe more importantly, like how does it differ from the regular marketplace integrations?
You probably have already come across Datasync. Out of like a little over 1,000 applications on the HubSpot marketplace, 100 of those are a Datasync app. So obviously there's built by HubSpot apps, and then a subsegment of that is you can be an app built by HubSpot, but it could also be a Datasync app. And Datasync is this it's this generic Datasync engine. It used to be called PySync back in the day. We rebuilt this natively inside of HubSpot, and it allows you to set up a sync of HubSpot data, currently contacts, companies, deals with other apps. And you can find it all is centralized in the marketplace.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think in the last show and tell you talked about two new features. I think it was deal sync and health, which like how does things stand with those two features at the moment?
We launched, so deal sync was a big one. As for health, it's still not yet launched, but we're really close to. It's this eagerly awaited feature to show you, give you insights as to how a sync is doing. So once you fire up a sync, how much data is going back and forth, what is not syncing, like what is failing to sync. Maybe a contact's like not making it over because of some formatting error. Maybe a contact's not making it over because, well, it was there, but then you went in and deleted it. Like giving you that type of data that you probably want in a sync. It's running in beta already. We're really close to rolling it out. It's just huge amounts of data to architecturally get right. So we're carefully rolling this out. As for deal sync, that's doing fantastically well. Like deal sync, other apps may call it opportunities, like NetSuite or in Dynamics. It's this ability to two-way set up a synchronization of the deal object in HubSpot with whatever it's called in your other app, along with field mappings, along with those stages moving back and forth. So it's we don't yet see lots of use cases where people are consciously using doing deal pipeline management in two apps simultaneously. It's mostly you're using Pipedrive as this super simple salesy app, but you want that data in HubSpot. So yeah, you'll go ahead and bring that data over. It's just a very easy way to bring data into HubSpot, send it out of HubSpot without going through a CSV horror scenarios. Yeah, deal sync.
Yeah, it's super cool. I mean, we started with contact sync and company sync, I think.
Yeah.
Then we added deal sync. We also added associations.
Yeah.
But you're here to talk about another addition, right?
Yeah. So if you look at all of these data sync apps, what they all have in common is a contact. HubSpot's built around contacts. The next common denominator that you'll find is companies, sometimes called accounts. So we sync those along with the associations. We talked about deals, which you would find in CRMs. And then we looked from a macro level, we looked at some of these apps, and what we find CRMs have in common, as well as HubSpot, as well as accounting apps, is this thing called a product. So the product object is the next sync that we're rolling out. In order to demo this, I have to choose one app. I'll go with Xero. Now, if you're using another app of Xero, this demo is just as relevant. If you're using Dynamics, FreshBooks, NetSuite, it's all generic. So let's jump inside of my data sync app, where you can already see I have a contact sync running, and I'll be setting up a product sync too. It does show invoice sync here, but that's for a later thing. So just ignore that. That's just in QA. We're talking about product sync here. Let me just fire that up. So what are we really talking about here? So in an app like Xero, just quickly confirming that this is my org. This is what a data sync setup looks like. So in order to get thinking product in an app like Xero, right? My contacts are already kept in sync, right? So here's my football team that I'm trying to sell a bunch of t-shirts to. Here's my contact person. You may have this contact already in sync. You saw my contact sync running. So there he is. In HubSpot, you may be adding products using line items. In Xero, you may be adding products, yeah, just well, like an invoice, right? Product sync is this thing where, or product libraries, it helps you autocomplete, right? You start typing. If you're used to creating invoices, you have this shorthand, you use these arrows, you quickly go and confirm, it auto completes those line items. Now, HubSpot, same thing. You would add line items to a deal. You need those same products. As of late, we have this thing called, here's my product library inside of HubSpot. It's kind of nested. HubSpot payments, these products actually have become CMS objects, because you can be creating payment links, directly selling products through your website. It creates a checkout link. So these products become tremendously important things that you want to just not keep isolated to HubSpot. And if you think about it, I'm already showing you here a product library in HubSpot. You'll have the same product library in Xero. I mean, we're all this makes alarm bells go off in our heads, right? It's a hassle to be maintaining a large database with, sure, there's descriptions, there's URLs, there's these SKU codes, these product codes to keep up to date. If lots of prices, a price book, currencies. If you're a growing business, this is just too much of a hassle to keep up to date. You're going to be adding new products, you're going to be deprecating others. So product sync makes sense. So let's set it up. Here's my product sync. In typical fashion of data sync, we give you choice. Either you just want to bring in the product library that you have in Xero, or maybe you already have a fully equipped product library in HubSpot because of maybe some old e-commerce integrations that you have, and you just want to actually sync it over to that new accounting app that you're trying out for the first time. Because yeah, hey, remember, we're offering this for a wide array of apps, right? Sure, you can import a product library in those apps, but you don't like CSV. So that's why you could potentially leverage this as a quick means of importing and exporting. But more importantly, you just do it two-way, meaning it's a continuous sync. And out of HubSpot's product library, you're basically remote controlling the product library as it appears in Xero or as it appears in any of your other apps. Now, it's a ongoing sync. So if you do set this up two-way and there's already data living in both apps, we do need a way to avoid duplicates. So purely cosmetically, it says it's unavailable here, but that's just a cosmetic thing to fix. We have a means to deduplicate, like on the means of SKU, like any product would have like a unique SKU, product code. There's certain apps where you don't have a product SKU, we would deduplicate or match on the product name instead. You can see that more clearly in field mapping, which is a typical UX scenario for all our data syncs. You basically tell us what data you want to go back and forth. Here you see that SKU talks to code. In the case of multi-currency apps, we'll also make sure that the screen gives you ample warnings to make sure that your currencies are set up straight. But that's what product sync look like. It doesn't look like mightily complex, and that's because we don't want it to be complex. You just fire up the sync, and you will have a product library that is now the same, regardless of which app you're looking it into. So that's really like the quintessential problem that Datasync wants to solve, right? You're using different tools. You have to use different tools because Xero basically does a couple of things that you don't do in HubSpot. But still, the very t-shirts that you're referring to here and the t-shirts that you have in HubSpot, they are the exact same t-shirts that lie in your warehouse. So with that, if that underlying data is different, you just want a data sync connecting those two databases. So that's product sync.
Thanks, Frans. That's really cool. I love that we're adding this. Like, any idea when this feature will roll out or when the beta will go live?
We will indeed first launch this in beta because it's a new object. So we want to make sure we get all the feedback in so we don't lose ability to iterate. It'll be closed beta. What it means is we'll basically have the customer success managers, the HubSpot customers, allowed to enroll you. So if you feel like syncing product libraries is something that you need, they'll give you the ability to do so. In about a month or so, we'll get there.
Cool. A month. That sounds really cool. And I'll make sure, of course, to also notify anyone in the community as well when that happens and when that beta rolls out, to make sure that they also can have a spot there. To close us off here, is there anything you would like to ask the audience? Maybe some input or some feedback?
The input's likely going to come organically with questions, but call to action is we want to build what customers need. So let us know in the chat or in the community what objects you may need. And the thing to keep in mind with this call to action is perhaps this, like, don't just like request a random thing. Like, always think about what Datasync wants to solve. It always wants to pair up an object in one app with a HubSpot object. So if you're having this app, like it's called app X, and it has this thing called work orders. Oh, HubSpot should sync work orders out of X. Cool, but try to also frame your request in like, it would be great if HubSpot could sync work orders with X in HubSpot, so that we have that we are building to solve for the right use case.
Cool. I saw some questions come in the Q&A. I think one was by Dane. I wish QuickBooks Desktop Sync was a thing. Okay. Is that something?
So this would lead us astray, but the QuickBooks Sync is actually like it's not yet really powered by Datasync, because historically we've had the QuickBooks Sync for a while already. I think notoriously QuickBooks, the desktop app is just not as sync friendly in general. So I'm not sure that's going to be something we'll be able to build in the near or midterm future.
Okay, that's good to know. And then was one other question by Justine. Are you saying that Xero will create an invoice from HubSpot now, or will it just sync in Xero?
Well, did I not post a Madagascar penguin gif of saying you did not see anything? We don't. That was just a proof of concept. We basically don't have any fixed idea on that yet. So
okay, that's good to know.
No, I mean, I don't want to snarkily reply to the question, but we simply don't know yet. I mean, ideally, of course, if you're having these invoices in Xero, it would make total sense to have these invoices coexist in HubSpot as well, attached to deals. I mean, totally.
Yeah. And maybe one last question, would Datasync be available for custom objects in HubSpot?
Oh, that is, well, it's not end game for us, but it's something we're dreaming of. I do believe in terms of timeline setting, we're not looking at that this year. But that is, we have like this internal roadmap of this, like the things that we do where we want Datasync to go to. Custom object sync is definitely on that list, but it's just not going to be this year, unfortunately.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Frans. We'll head on over to scheduled triggers, and we have Megan here and Zach to talk a little bit more about well, what scheduled is and what it is. How are you two doing?
Hi, Jan. Great. Thank you for having us today.
Yeah, happy to have you. So let's start off with like what I just asked. Like, what is scheduled triggers? How does it look? What does it look like? How does it work? I'd love to learn a bit more about it.
For sure. I can take you on a dive in. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, I think we're live. So as Jan said, I'm Megan Legge. I'm a product manager for the workflows tool at HubSpot. And I'm going to talk to you today about scheduled triggers, which is something that my team launched in December of last year. So if you think of workflows previously, they're always triggered when something changes or happens, but that doesn't really solve for the repetitive processes that aren't tied to anything changing and just need to happen on a specific cadence, like every Monday or the first of the month, which means workflows couldn't really help with processes like this. People were doing them manually, maybe you have some sort of complex workaround, or you're even using a different tool to support those processes. But now, with the introduction of scheduled triggers, we are bringing you the ability to automate those recurring processes, save time, improve efficiency, and just run workflows on custom predefined intervals. And now some of you may already have the wheels turning in your heads about how you'd use these. I'm going to actually dive into some of our top use cases that I've already heard and spoken to customers who are using to give you some inspiration. So the first one would be to use scheduled triggers to create a bespoke integration. You can do so by combining it with the custom code action. This makes a pretty dynamic duo because it helps you create a custom sync between HubSpot and any third-party app that has open and available APIs. It allows you to just send and receive that data without any costly or time-consuming middleware required. So a couple real-world examples from our customers. One is using this combination of actions to export daily backups of object data to their data lake, which their analyst team uses to connect to Power BI. Another is using it to do nightly checks on orders in their supply management system, so they can update HubSpot deals with the current order status. And this makes it so that their reps no longer need to bounce between two systems to get that information. Another set of use cases would be regularly scheduled data cleanup or enhancing data quality. So for example, by pairing scheduled triggers with the format data action, each day you could clean up data for all the contacts that were created over the last 24 hours, doing things like capitalizing their first and last name, just correcting any data entry errors. Something else that several customers have started doing is stamping custom properties. So you could even set the current date every day to enable more flexible calculations like time between formulas. The last set of use cases that I'll highlight would be the ability to automate internal processes for your team. So scheduled triggers can help teams streamline those administrative tasks that are often manual but need to be timely. So for example, one manager told me they're using this feature to send Slack messages to their teammates every Monday morning, asking them to add their notes to the team's weekly agenda. Previously, this is something the manager had to do every Monday, and now the task can be taken off their plate. One more example would be from a sales ops leader. They're using a scheduled trigger workflow to run toward the end of each month, creating tasks to remind the sales team to either close open deals or move them to the next month. So hopefully that helps sort of give you some ideas of how this might help your business. I'd love to hear about how you think you could use this or get value from it. Any questions or feedback that you have. So please put those in the Q&A. And now I'm going to hand it off to Zach, who's an engineer on the workflows team. He helped build the feature and he's going to give you a demo.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. My name is Zach and I'm a software engineer on the automation platform front-end team. So today I just want to demonstrate how to create scheduled workflows in HubSpot. To set the scene, let's imagine that my task is to create an automation that cleans up any data that was entered the day before. To start, I'll just be creating a workflow. So at this point, I'd just like to point out that scheduled workflows work for any of these workflow types. For this example, let's just select contact-based workflows. Here's where you can select the schedule for your workflow. For the schedules that we provide, you can select between daily, weekly, monthly, or annual cadence. There's some fun options in the monthly category. Specifically, you can choose a day of the month for your workflow to execute. We also provide this flexible days option, which allows you to select the last day of the month or the first day of or for example, the first Monday of the month. For our example, where we're running a daily automation to clean up data, I think daily makes the most sense. And for the time of day, let's just put that at the end of the day. So we'll make sure everything is ready to go by tomorrow morning. I think the internet at the office has been giving me some trouble today. So there we go. Okay. To begin with, let's just decide who gets enrolled in the workflow and when the workflow will trigger. So since our task is to create an automation that cleans up contact data that is entered in the previous day, our enrollment criteria will be filtering on contact properties. And maybe we just go to create date and pick any contacts that were created less than a day ago. So at this point, contacts that were created less than a day ago will enroll, and they will enroll at 10 p.m. Every day. Next, let's begin to format some of this data that was entered within the last 24 hours. For that, we'll use our format data action. And we're going to imagine that in this scenario, we want to make sure that our contacts' first names are all formatted the way we want. Let's imagine that we've noticed the first name properties are coming in with all sorts of different capitalization. And all we want to do is just capitalize that first letter. Great. Finally, let's take that formatted data and make sure we save it back to the property it came from. So I'm just going to choose that first, the output of the format data action that we just created. And I'm going to save it to our contact first name. Sweet. And just reviewing this really quick. For any contacts that were created less than a day ago, every day at 10 p.m., what we want to do is go and format that first name property, capitalize it, and save it back to that contact property. And if that all looks good, all that's left to do is review and publish. And we're done. So this workflow will run every night and clean up any data from the last 24 hours. And that was pretty quick to set up. So we're really excited to see how you guys use this. Feel free to hop into your HubSpot portal and play around with it. This is live to pro and enterprise customers right now, and we're really looking forward to see what you guys build. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for demoing that, Zach. I mean, that's super powerful, and like Nicholas said in the chat, being able to schedule data cleanup is so huge. So this is a really exciting feature. I'm really happy that we added it to it. I mean, I'm curious to what your teams are working on next for like schedule triggers. Are there any upcoming features that you may be able to tease a little bit?
Yeah, I can share something. So sort of tangential to scheduled triggers, one of the other workflows teams is making some exciting updates to the webhook action. So I could see this pairing nicely with scheduled triggers among other use cases. For example, like that custom integration use case. So the updates to the webhook action are going to be the ability to make GET requests. So today we just do post requests with webhook, but now we can do GET requests, pull in data from other systems. And then additionally, you'll be able to use data from the webhook response in your workflow. So I could see this working like you run a scheduled trigger, you pull in data from another system, you use that data like set a update key properties in the CRM, and you're keeping those systems in sync too. So that'll be exciting for scheduled triggers and all sorts of other webhook use cases. It's coming to beta pretty soon, so keep your eyes out.
Yeah, that's super exciting. I think the adding like all those new functionalities to webhook actions was a bit long overdue. So I'm happy that we're finally getting there. It will make the entire like automation platform just so much more powerful. Yeah, I mean, we'll probably be able to showcase it on the next show and tell. I hope so, because that would be really cool. But all right. Thanks. There were some questions coming in, so I'm happy to maybe already have you answer a couple of them. Let me see. I'm scrolling to the Q&A here. There was one question here by Diana, similar to what I asked Frans previously. Like, will schedule triggers also work with custom objects?
Yes, they do work with custom object workflows.
All right, that's really cool. And then there was one question by Ian. If you have the time, can you do a very quick workflow, run daily, and if birthday equals today, then send happy birthday email message? I'm not sure if that makes sense. I'm happy to repeat it.
Yeah, I think I see where he's going. We actually have a different type of workflow that lets you do something like a birthday greeting. So there are date property workflows that you'll see in there for contacts. And I think they list out a birthday use case as a common use case. But actually there's something else that I can tease. We're working on making more flexible date delays that will let you do these kinds of things across more workflow types. So reach out to HubSpot support if you need help setting up the birthday email use case, and also there'll be more robust functionality coming there.
Awesome. Maybe one last question, then we'll move over to Stephen for Datasets. Are you able to provide additional information on the scheduled triggers and the first use case you described, like sending backup of object to the data lake, data warehouse? I'm happy to repeat it if the question didn't really make a whole lot of sense.
Can you?
Yeah, so Kyle,
elaborate a little.
Yeah, are you able to provide additional information on the scheduled triggers and the first use case you described, which was sending a backup of an object to a data lake or data warehouse?
My interpretation of what the customer was doing is they had a particular object they care about. So for sake of example, say it was deals. And what they were doing is they were enrolling all of their deals into a daily workflow and using the custom code action to send property data from every deal object to sort of recreate the data that was important to them in the data lake. And then their analyst team pulled from that pool of data to do the analysis that they were interested in.
I think that makes sense. We'll move over to Datasets here. Let me reshare my screen again. Stephen, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, intentively listening to Megan and thinking about my own team collaboration with them. So I'm like learning here with y'all. I'm doing well today.
Yeah, it's a learning experience for all of us. So yeah, Datasets is still pretty new. We launched it in November last year with the launch of Enterprise. So with the fact that there's plenty of new people here, I'd love for you to kind of talk about Datasets in general, what it is and why we built it.
Yeah, cool. Can I grab the screen share right now, actually?
Absolutely. Yeah, take over.
Okay. Hopefully you're seeing HubSpot. Yeah, so we built data sets basically to give ops people and data people more power over the data and the reports they build in HubSpot. So within HubSpot, you go reports and data sets. And here you're going to go to create a new data set. Everything you see here is something that I've personally built. They don't come like out of the box because these are like bespoke solutions for your company. The purpose of data sets is to give you power over what data you're connecting, deals, contacts, whatever is relevant, and then to be able to prepare a data set that'll be later used for reporting purposes, but will have like not all 200 contact properties in your whole system, but only the ones that matter to you, and then some calculated fields that have relevant information. So this is what the UI looks like. I've built out an advanced data sets example here. Going to dive right into some capabilities, and then we just launched with if functions and the question at the end. So in this data set, I've just dragged in different fields by taking them, dragging them in, such as deal name, owner, assigned date, anything that's relevant that's already in the system. But then below, I've done some calculations against new fields just to like transform data. So I've taken the deal amount and I've just renamed it to MRR. In our system, the deal amount is monthly recurring revenue. So that's kind of how I want to contextualize it for my sales team. But additionally, instead of MRR, I might want to know the annual recurring revenue. So that's just taking the MRR and multiplying it by 12. There's a bunch of different things you can do to transform data. So we have a whole function library with absolute value, concatenations, date differences. A good example would be here, where I'm taking the date difference between the assigned date of a deal and today, and I'm calculating the value that tells me like how many days have existed between the start date of a deal and today. I saw a similar question in the chat, so I want to quickly show this. There's a ton you can do here. Something we recently launched was an if function. I want to specifically call this out because this is really cool. What it allows you to do is take conditional logic and then derive new data segments. So here, I already have some examples, but I'll show you how this works. First, I'm going to create a new formula field. For our business use case, I want to know all of the deals that have MRR that's greater than about $5,000 a month. If that's true, I want to label the deal with greater than 5,000. If it's not true, I want to label with not true. So if you said MRR is greater than 5,000, then I want the value to be stamped as greater than 5,000. If it's less than 5,000, I want the value to be stamped with, or not less, just say not, because it could be greater than, yeah, so not greater than 5,000. Now, as you can see, this returns a value in a column. I can name this whatever I want. Quick example. A more practical example of this is that you might want to be like using some relatively complex logic to derive tiers for your company. Every deal might sit in either a starter, pro, or enterprise tier. And what defines a starter tier is like logic that's bespoke to your company. So in this example, I said tier here, and I said if MRR is less than 5,000 or the number of employees of that company is less than or equal to 150, call it starter tier. And then I have 3 different tiers set up here with nested if statements. So this is like a more complicated example that basically just gives me starter, pro, or enterprise. Based on the tier of the deal, I want to give a different commission rate to my sales team. This is like a pretty applicable example that we get a lot of feedback on. So based on starter tier, I'm giving my sales reps a 10% commission, or a 12.5% commission for pro, or a 15% commission for enterprise. And I'm dynamically calculating that commission to send to the finance team. So this is like a live example of like using if statements to categorize your data and then dynamically run calculations or create other results that are bespoke to your business strategy. The final output of this can be shown in like advanced in the report builder. So here I have a report already built out. It shows the tiers of deals that I just created with if statements. I have summed the commission payout, and then I've actually broken it down by deal owner, so I know how much I'm paying Stephen and how much I'm paying Christina. This is basically what I wanted to show today. I'm happy to take more questions though.
That's really powerful. The if state functions inside datasets. Just to kind of clarify, maybe I missed it. This was launched recently, right?
The datasets feature as a whole was launched in October. If statements were launched into open beta for everyone to use, like last week. I don't know which day exactly, but
last week. Okay, I just wanted to clear that up. Okay, very cool. There's one person in the chat. Will is asking you, will you be doing any like master classes on datasets in the community? Similar to like, I'm not sure if you watched or heard of like Jack Goldrick's custom code masterclasses.
I didn't watch it, but I'm in awe of Jack. He also did a custom coded action library that's super useful. And I've heard it's got a lot of good traction. We're definitely planning to do some sort of like shareable artifact about like different examples of how to use data sets. That's been like highly requested. In terms of masterclass, I can set that up with you, Jan, just to have more free flow kind of vibe. We did that sometime last week, I think. Went well. We can do another one. Yeah.
Yeah, we're holding, or we're planning to hold. The last one was I would say a success. We're holding like office hours every month on data sets, on data sync, and on automation features in the community. But that's very like informal and just 1 hour of us talking about data sets basically. But I can definitely see us creating like a similar like use case library for data sets. And yeah, if there's enough use cases to talk about, maybe we'll set up like a workshop as well. It could be definitely interesting to do something with that.
Yeah, I'm just going to go through these quick hits in the Q&A section, and then we can open it up for like other questions that are missed on the other teams.
Go ahead.
Does datasets remove the calculated property cap? No, calculated properties are persisted in the CRM. Datasets are meant for reporting purposes. So they're mostly just used within reporting context today, whereas calculated properties give you power throughout the CRM, store data, it's always sitting there. Curious, the roadmap includes datasets for more than just reporting. I love this question. This is a question I'm actively thinking about. Where else in the system people want to use data sets or things they've calculated or derived within a data set. If you have ideas, I have ideas, but I'd love for you to like send them to me because we're actively looking for feedback on how people would like to use it. Does data sets sync to SQL? Does it stay up to date and can be used in workflows? Feels like a similar question about can be used other places, not today. And does it sync to SQL? We don't actually export the SQL statement that we're writing in the back end. We basically just leave it on the app level syntax that I showed you in the demo. My business calculated fields, same question. Does this apply to all property types, single, radial, select, multi-line? The goal of datasets is to use all property types. Currently, there are limitations around like multi-checkbox properties, I believe, is the limitations, but we're still working through those. And the end goal of datasets is really like, let you transform and work with any data type that exists in HubSpot today, including anything in a custom code, in a custom object. And then the final question is it possible to create anything similar to revenue analytics using datasets? I don't know exactly what that means, but like revenue analytics around things like your MRR, commission rates, compound interest formulas, all of that stuff is possible just through a conjunction of like different nested formulas using power functions and multiplication. A lot of it is possible. Not everything. We're still working on like complex aggregate math calculations.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen, for speeding through those. I'll open up the Q&A for everyone and for any type of question. We already got several questions here in the Q&A box, so I'll try and go from the top and the ones that are most voted upon. The first one is by Randy, and they have a question about Snowflake data share. We didn't actually talk about Snowflake data share. We didn't have Megan on the call today. Stephen, is that something that you can talk a little bit about, or?
Yeah, I can do a quick rundown. Snowflake Data Share is an Ops Hub Enterprise feature. It is focused on kind of like pushing all the data that's in our Snowflake instance. Snowflake underpins Datasets and the customer report builder. That's what we're using to kind of like power those insights, the deep transformations and aggregations. So we're kind of just like doing a bulk, like messy push right into your Snowflake instance. So you can run queries against the data or transform it outside HubSpot and then pipe it into a BI tool or whatever else you want to use it with.
Cool. Thanks for explaining that. The next question is by Alex, and this I think is regarding product sync. Alex asks, products are listed by their internal idea, and there are limited ways to sort the list across CRM. What are your thoughts, Frans?
I'm not sure if this is a question surrounding just managing the product inside of HubSpot as a whole. What I can say is like, we will match. So if you sync your product library in HubSpot towards another tool, we will always match on SKU, or sometimes that's called product code, sometimes it's called code. If we don't have that, because HubSpot has it, but if the other app doesn't have it, we will match on name exclusively. We will also make sure that the source is set accordingly in the HubSpot product library. So if you happen to be syncing in from, that's what's likely going to happen, right? You're going to hook in your Shopify, you're going to hook in your Xero, then you're going to hook in your FreshBooks, because that's what that other subsidiary uses. You're going to be seeing in the product library in HubSpot where those different products come from. So you do have some mechanisms to sort, and then we are thinking of including some more properties to help you make more sense of properties of products. Hopefully that makes sense.
I think it does. There was one question regarding, I think data sync in general. What's the status of drop-down properties being added to the custom field mappings?
Still working on it. We should be releasing that this year. It's tricky to do so generically, right? We always have to solve for things generically. Owner sync is, as we've mentioned in these webinars, is actually like a first big step towards this, where we're synchronizing things like an owner, which in itself is actually requires us to sync associations. It gets quite complex, even though it seems super straightforward. Like, hey, there's a drop down here, there's a drop down there, but under the hood, it does require a lot of sync magic, and we're still cracking the code on that, but we're close.
Right. Next question is by Angelica. I think it's also to do with data sync. I might be wrong, but could this feature edit deal names? For example, some of our sales teams goes rogue at times when creating and editing those. So I think it's regarding deal sync.
I think maybe actually scheduled trigger use case of cleanup of data sync.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you're totally right.
So that format, data action, and scheduled triggers are available in deal workflows, all workflow types. So you could use it to transform deal name using those same formulas that are available. So just check out if it's got what you want, and you can use it on deal names.
But Megan and Jan, I'd love to piggyback on that and state that the cleanup that you're doing in HubSpot, if you attach a deal sync to that, or a product sync or a contact sync, like the cleanup that you're doing inside of HubSpot, because of data sync, it will actually perform that cleanup in the other tools where that very same data is present. Beautiful.
Which is beautiful, yes.
Right. The next question is also regarding scheduled triggers. Say we want to do first and last name. Do you suggest a single workflow or create one for each field?
Yeah, like Zeke answered there. I think you can put that all in the same workflow and have that be your daily data cleanup workflow. You can have a step to do the first name, then another step to do the last name, and then more steps for anything else that you want to format every night is for that example.
Right. There's one question about the recording. We will send a recording to everyone tomorrow, and you will also be able to find it on our YouTube channel, which I linked at the beginning of this event. But yeah, Next question is by Dan. Is there any plan to allow array iteratable data types to be outputted by the custom code function? Megan, is that something that you could speak to?
I would go with Zeke's answer. Zeke is an engineer on my team, so I trust
okay.
his answer will hopefully be thorough. So yeah, go ahead and read what he wrote there. That's helpful.
Yeah, so Zeke is saying that should already be supported. If you go to the bottom of the custom code action, you'll see data outputs. If you add a new output, you can select type enumeration to assign a variable to an array. So it's good that I can trust Zeke on this. Okay, we have one question directed at you, Megan, by Karthik. I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. We need that any ATA on it. So I'm guessing it's on webhooks.
The webhooks, yeah, the improvements to the webhook action. So this is a different automation team. So my understanding is in the next few weeks, this may come to beta, but officially I know the answer is soon. So keep your eyes out.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we have a question that was answered by Zeke again from Randy, and I'll go through it. Randy asks, will we be able to utilize custom behavioral events in workflows? Right now, the only way to use them is with a delayed start on enterprise level, but we can't use them to trigger workflows or an if-then branching logic. And Zeke's response to that was, we have plans for this next year to work on events as triggers in workflows, which would absolutely allow you to use custom behavioral events and all sorts of other HubSpot defined events like email, opened, and form submissions. The timeline is still hazy, but it is something we'd love to bring to the tool. So thanks, Zeke, for answering that. We should probably have Zeke on the call next time, if he'll have us. And then we have one last question, and it's great because we're coming up on time as well, by Philip. You guys mentioned QuickBooks app earlier. My question is, do you see being able to sync with the desktop version of QuickBooks anytime? Our company has thousands of customers we would like to sync to HubSpot, and I think Frans already kind of answered that in the previous Q&A, but Frans, feel free to elaborate if you want.
No, as I said, and actually, I'm actually struggling to find the comment. There is Rochelle actually indicates that Intuit may not want it, but so for our data sync approach is, and maybe HubSpot in general is, whatever we build, we want an API for it, and that's how we build our integrations, right? We just hack away at an API. If it's possible, we'll build it. Sometimes it requires advanced partnerships. We'll go there if we want to, but we find that data should float freely. If QuickBooks has this feeling, I can't confirm or deny this, but as I said, it's just probably not gonna come anytime soon, I'm afraid.
A bit of a shame, but yeah, it's probably not something we can do much about. And if I recall from my PySync days, we weren't able to sync with QuickBooks Desktop back then either. But yeah, I guess it's kind of is what it is. But I guess that brings us to kind of the end of this event. I mean, I want to thank everyone for showing up here in such large numbers. I want to thank Frans, Stephen, Megan, and Zach for being here and presenting all of these new features. We saw product sync in kind of a demo environment. We saw the new if functions on Datasets, and then we saw schedule triggers and a quick tease to some new webhook functions as well, being added very shortly. So all super excited. Yeah, I wanted to kind of end this event with maybe a call to action to everyone here. I'd love to hear what you want to see added to Operations Hub. So I create this post in the community this morning. Feel free to, if you have any thoughts, like things that maybe frustrate you in HubSpot, or maybe just let your imagination run free, and feel free to comment on that post. I'd love to hear your opinions, and maybe it's something we can work on in the future. But yeah, thanks so much for being here, everyone. Thanks to all the panelists, and I hope to see you in the next quarter. All right, take care and bye.